When I first started working at a large IT company, two women, Clara and Diana, immediately caught my attention. They weren't just leaders, they commanded every moment as if the world revolved around them. Clara, with her stern gaze and impeccable style, inspired respect with her mere presence. Diana, on the other hand, smiled more often, but behind that smile lay a strength I could sense right away. Together, they were a duo impossible to ignore. My first week at work was calm. Mostly, I sat at my computer, handling routine tasks assigned to me as a newcomer. Yet from the start, something in Clara and Diana's behavior intrigued me. Their glances and brief exchanges always left me with the impression that they were discussing more than just work. One night, when I stayed late in the office, I noticed them exchanging a look, and that glance seemed to pierce the space between them and me. The next day, as I returned to my duties, the atmosphere in the office felt slightly different. Colleagues' gazes seemed more intense, and my managers appeared more attentive to my actions. The entire day passed with a sense of tension, as if something was brewing. Toward evening, Clara approached me, smiled faintly, and invited me to stay for a meeting scheduled after work hours. I agreed, though I felt a slight unease inside. All day I pondered the upcoming meeting, trying to understand what might have prompted Clara's invitation. That evening, as the office began to empty, I made my way to her office. Diana was already there, sitting at the edge of the table with a cup of tea in her hands. They both looked at me as if something important had already been decided, and I had just walked into the game. "Take a seat, Mike." Clara gestured to the chair in front of her desk. Her tone was soft, but confidence radiated from it. Diana placed her cup down and looked at me as though she knew something significant. The strange sense of closeness emanating from them both enveloped me. I felt their interest in me went far beyond work, but I couldn't pinpoint what exactly they wanted. Not yet. "We've been discussing a project, and we'd like you to be involved," Clara began, her voice calm but insistent. I looked at them both, and though my thoughts tried to analyze the situation, something inside told me this was about more than just a project. Clara's office was bathed in the warm light of a desk lamp, creating a cozy contrast to the cold office atmosphere I was used to. On the shelves, books and awards were neatly arranged, giving the space a sense of warmth and respect for her as a professional. Diana stood near the large window, from which the nighttime view of New York could be seen. A gentle breeze swayed the curtains, filling the air with something unusual, a mixture of anticipation and tense calm. I perched on the edge of the table across from them, feeling my heartbeat quicken. Clara continued talking about the project, but my thoughts were drifting somewhere far away. I struggled to focus on her words. Their presence and glances made me feel something strange, inexplicable, as if I was at the center of events that had caught me by surprise. Suddenly, Diana moved closer, standing beside me, her hand gently resting on my shoulder as if by accident. I flinched at the touch, but I couldn't bring myself to pull away. She smiled as if sensing my reaction and leaned down to whisper something in my ear. "Clara and I have been thinking about this for a while, Mike. You do realize it's not just about work, right?" I tried to reply, but the words caught in my throat. At that moment, everything inside me seemed to freeze. Clara rose from her chair and came closer, her gaze deep and mesmerizing, her touch on my arm surprisingly warm. "We've been watching you for a while," Clara began, her voice calm but carrying a gentle tone. "And we like you." She leaned in slightly, and at the moment I felt her breath close, something within me snapped. Everything that had seemed so obvious and professional blurred in the air, leaving only the three of us. I didn't even realize when Diana leaned in gently, her lips brushing my cheek, barely perceptible but with a tender softness. I was overwhelmed but couldn't respond. Clara leaned in closer to my face, and just before our lips met, I caught her soft, whispering voice. "Are you ready for this?" And before I could answer, her kiss was quiet, almost tentative, like a light touch. In that moment, everything within me turned upside down. It was something unexpected, thrilling and tender, and I found myself responding to the kiss, forgetting everything that had come before. Diana also leaned closer, and as if following an unwritten script, her hands softly cupped my face, her kiss more intense, deeper. I was caught between them, realizing in that moment that the line between professionalism and something more personal had been completely erased. When we pulled away from each other, there was something new, something changed, lingering in the air. After we pulled back, silence enveloped the office like a thick, opaque veil. I could still feel the warmth of their touches on my skin, and something within me continued to waver between reality and what had just happened. Diana stood nearby, her gaze soft and probing, while Clara quietly returned to her desk as if nothing had happened. But I knew. Everything had changed. "You know," Diana spoke up suddenly, her voice quiet but resonant, "we didn't do this on a whim. We've needed someone who could be on the same wavelength as us for a long time." I looked at her, her face glowing with sincerity, and a hint of playfulness sparkled in her eyes. This wasn't just a whim. It was something much more serious. Clara quietly observed us, her delicate fingers lightly resting on the arm of her chair. "Do you feel it, Mike?" she asked, not breaking eye contact. "This isn't just desire, it's a connection. We see something more in you." Clara's words touched something deep within my mind. Until this point, I had always viewed work through the lens of duties and professionalism, but now, between these two women, my reality was shifting. Something in their confidence, in their readiness to speak openly, blurred all the boundaries I had built. "And what happens next?" I asked, not really knowing what answer I wanted. Clara smiled, her thin lips softening. She slowly rose from her chair and came closer, as if she was about to reveal something important. "It all depends on you," she said, her voice gentle but full of meaning. "You can walk away and forget, or you can stay and see what we're building together." Those words resonated in my heart, and I realized that this decision was far more complex than a simple yes or no. I stood before something greater than just work. Again, I felt Diana's touch on my shoulder. She gently squeezed it, her presence surprisingly reassuring. Clara stepped closer, her fingers lightly brushing my hand, and in that moment, I felt a new bond forming between us, quiet, almost invisible, but palpable. She leaned in, and our gazes met for a fraction of a second before her lips softly touched mine again. It was slow, as if time had stopped. I felt every moment, every breath. Diana, in that moment, was beside me, her lips brushing my cheek, cautious and gentle. I stood between them, and everything that was happening seemed surreal, like a scene from another world, yet at the same time it was a reality that had captured me completely. When the kisses ended, there were no doubts left between us. When the three of us found ourselves on the office building's rooftop, the night air was cool, yet it didn't reflect the warmth between us. New York sprawled below, its lights twinkling as if affirming that everything happening was real and not a dream. The sound of distant cars felt like an echo, unimportant in this moment. Clara stood by the railing, leaning on it and staring into the endless city night. Her calmness always amazed me. She seemed to control not only her surroundings but reality itself. Diana sat on a bench nearby, her hair dancing in the wind like flames, and I could feel her gaze on me. "Mike," Diana began softly, her voice barely audible in the vast night, "do you know why we chose you?" I thought for a moment. From the start, something inside told me that this was no mere coincidence. Their attention was too deliberate, too personal. "You were different," she continued, not waiting for my response. "You didn't come here just for a career. There's something in you that draws us. It's not just work. You understand that?" I slowly approached them, trying to grasp what she meant. Clara pulled herself away from the city view and looked at me. Her eyes held something deep, as if she already knew all the answers but was waiting for me to uncover them myself. "We both know what you're feeling," she said gently, her voice like silk but with a hint of insistence. "We feel this connection between us." I struggled to find words to express what was happening in my heart. These women, these moments, it all felt too fast yet completely natural. Between us was something elusive, like an invisible thread that I couldn't break. Diana came closer, her hand gently touching mine, as if trying to reassure me, to let me know I wasn't alone in my feelings. "We won't rush you, Mike," Her voice was as soft as a breeze. "But you must understand, we're no longer just colleagues. We've become something more." Clara, standing next to us, leaned forward, her gaze piercing, seeming to reach the depths of my soul. "We don't care what the world thinks," she whispered. "We're creating our own world, just the three of us." Those words penetrated me like a promise of the unknown, like a challenge to fate. I looked at them both, and in that moment I understood that I had stepped into this world with them. The decision was made, even if I hadn't fully realized it. The New York skyline below no longer seemed important. Returning to the office, the atmosphere felt transformed. The space no longer felt cold and foreign. Instead, it held an unspoken sense of something familiar, almost intimate. Clara and Diana walked beside me, and this simple detail, their presence, seemed to reshape my perception of everything between us. The dynamic that had developed over recent weeks had finally found its resolution. All week after that night on the rooftop, I was immersed in work. But my thoughts constantly returned to the moment when everything had changed. Clara remained calm, confident in her actions, while Diana, as always, showed warmth and kindness in every interaction. Yet something between us no longer needed words. We stood together in front of the large glass window of the conference room. The view of the city was breathtaking, and this moment felt perfect for the culmination of everything we had started. The inner tension that had been building within me suddenly dissipated. I realized that this was not just a temporary connection, not something I could forget the next day. "You know everything will be different now?" Clara suddenly asked, her voice steady and calm, yet filled with seriousness. I nodded, not trying to hide the obvious. Yes, I felt it with every fiber of my being. This was not just a choice, it was a turning point in my life, a moment when I opened up to something new and unfamiliar. In that moment, I finally accepted it. And with that acceptance came peace. "I think we all knew where this was heading," Diana added, her voice warm and tender, like a promise that everything would be okay. We sat at the large table, not to discuss business but simply to be together. Our glances met, and it was clear without words that something profound had developed between us, something intimate, but without needing explanation. Diana leaned slightly toward me, her arms wrapped around my shoulders in a quiet gesture of trust. She didn't say a word, but her touch spoke more than any phrases could. Clara watched us with a soft smile, and I felt that the boundaries between us had completely disappeared. "This is just the beginning," she whispered suddenly, her eyes shining with a mysterious light. And at that moment, I understood that this relationship had become not just a phase, but a genuine turning point in my life. We were no longer who we had been. Our connections had become something new, something that would continue to evolve, but without the rush or fear of the future. As the evening light began to stream through the windows, reflecting off the skyscrapers, I felt a strange weight lift from my shoulders. I knew that ahead lay the unknown, but it no longer frightened me. Clara and Diana were there, and in that was strength. We had all found something more than just work, and this moment was the beginning of a new chapter, one we couldn't yet fully understand, but were already anticipating.